Okay, morning everybody. Welcome to our latest research on websites and the Web 100 as we call it. Today we'll explain the theme that we've come up with this year for Lifeforce or Lifeless. Hopefully that will become clear as we come through the research that we've done over this year. But before we get going, I thought it'd be great to introduce the team that are presenting today. I'm Richard. I'm Chief Digital Officer at Black Sun, look after all of the digital solutions and our digital proposition market. Erica, say hi.
Hello, my name is Erica Susanto. I'm the Head of Knowledge and Innovation at Black Sun. I take care of all the research projects and the curation of knowledge assets here at Black Sun.
And Dan.
Hi guys, Dan Cowley, so Head of Digital Strategy. So my job is really around showcasing the value creation story of our clients, thinking about stakeholders, their requirements, user experience, functionality, and bringing that narrative and storytelling to life online.
Great, thanks guys. And today what we're going to cover is, I'll just do a really quick intro to Black Sun for those of you who aren't familiar with us and what we do. Then what we'll do is crack straight into the research that we've done on the Web 100 and explain a little bit about what we look for, some of the metrics we look at, and of course then into the meat of the presentation around sharing some of our findings on the latest trends and sharing some really good best practice examples. Do feel free to ask any questions as we go through. I think there's a little opportunity at the bottom to raise a hand, and we'll also have questions at the end. If you want to follow us, you can use these Twitter hashtags. And also there's a little QR code there that takes you to a web page in our website where you'll have a little bit of a summary of the research that you can view afterwards. There are also a couple of other events we'll share with you at the end of this on more detailed areas around sustainability, career sites and so on. But as I say, more on that right at the end for you. So as we just go through into the press, just a quick introduction on Black Sun. I'll take you through very briefly. We're an international stakeholder communications company. And what we do is really help organizations connect, engage and communicate better with their stakeholders. We have three kind of main pillars, if you like: the investor communication, stakeholder reporting, which obviously covers things like annual report, integrated report, presentation events, wider communications around the corporate narrative. Sustainability communications, particularly ESG, sustainability, TCFD, climate change, and also some of the communications that go around sustainability, both for internal and external audiences. And of course, the meat of this presentation around digital transformation and corporate websites, microsites, and so on. And as far as our digital services go, we offer a complete digital service suite. So digital consultancy led by Dan and his good offices. Particularly around benchmarking, which obviously you'll see a lot of that today, using these analysis, communications and so on, delivering a great user experience through creative and design. We also help clients, strategy and plan their content, editorial updates for the site, and of course, copywriting, film, animation, usual kind of content type services. And of course, for many clients, we also actually develop, manage, host and support them on their corporate website. Just to give you a bit of a flavour of the last kind of couple of months or so that we've worked, the latest work we've done here with CCH and their corporate site in 20 country sites. So a project that launched last year. We also look after B2B websites. So here's one of our most recent examples launched in November for Inmarsat, and that promotes their thought leadership, products, services and solutions. Great new recent site there. We also do data-driven solutions. So we have last year we launched Baltic and both their corporate site and also their member area, which shows their shipping data and market information to their member subscriber community. And of course, we deliver both online reports. There's one this year that we did for Aviva, just launched, and also investor relations site. So this site is an example where Dan has provided consultancy services for Sage to help them enhance and improve and relaunch their investor relations site, which they manage themselves in-house. And of course, Capital Markets Day. So this is a recent example we did for Direct Line Group, where we help them deliver and communicate and engage with their investor audiences in their Capital Market Day. Well, that's probably more than enough about us. Now let's go on to the Web 100 and just share a little bit around, what we look at and, how we analyze the corporate sites. Dan, do you want to take us through this?
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Rich. So I think the important thing here is just really kind of outlining that we've been doing obviously this for 7 years, and essentially it's given us a huge amount of insights in terms of what best practice means. But when we're looking at this and we're thinking about the website, we're actually looking at 200 metrics. So it fluctuates year on year depending on trends and requirements and best practice. But actually it's more than that. It's also looking at a wealth of experience in terms of years within the industry, and also then thinking about how maybe regulators have kind of influenced it. So things around ICO recommendations, looking at analytics and the user journeys. So we're not just looking at our own data, we're also bringing to bear a lot of that best practice, special kind of knowledge in terms of what the audience requirements are, in terms of how we bring more of that together. And in terms of what we're looking at, we're separating out into two very distinct groups. So it's content and experience. Content aligns with what you'd expect from a corporate site, looking at things like the narrative, things around the investor kind of messaging, things around sustainability and careers. And the experience is really exactly what it says on the tin in terms of, usability of the site, the ability to find content quickly and easily, modern, gripping, creative. So again, we're looking at a myriad of these things in terms of those metrics. And what that allows us then to do is kind of think about what best practice can mean. And when we're looking at analytics, and we did this for the first time last year in terms of, the cross-pollination of users, we're also thinking about the content audiences are viewing. So what content are they looking for? Search terms they're using and their visit profiles were three kind of key findings we found this year. And what we deduced was that actually, the corporate site is still very much the kind of the bread and butter for an investor-focused audience who are spending a lot more time on pages and also visiting multiple pages when they're visiting the site. But what's really interesting for us is the dynamics across the audience types when we're looking at things like sustainability. The dwell time is higher for those users and maybe a little bit lower in terms of having the interest across different pages. And again, media and careers tends to align a little bit around how audiences are spending time on the site, but also then obviously navigating through. So we've only got a small window in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of encouraging them to read and obviously engage with the content. But also we looked at what audiences are viewing, and here you can see a little word cloud in terms of what the audiences are focusing on. And there's no real surprises here when it things like results or reports. And obviously, investor tools, annual report, that kind of thing. But what's interesting for us is when we start looking and delving down into what those audiences are searching for, we're not just seeing things like annual report or dividends, but we're also seeing sustainability. So again, there's alignment in terms of audiences actually going beyond their silos, thinking beyond the investor narrative and thinking about how different areas of the site are impacting their own needs and their own requirements. If we do the same with prospective employees, again, thinking about here, graduate opportunities, different things around kind of, training and policies and different things. But again, the alignment of this in terms of beyond that, thinking about the business they want to be working for. So thinking about the culture, thinking about the business. And then when we start looking at that in terms of the individual search terms, you'll see here there's things around mission, vision, the values of the business. So again, these job seekers are also interested in not just the fact that you're an organization who's doing X, Y, and Z, but also doing it in a responsible way. And obviously then having a culture that they buy into, a purpose that they buy into. And that's very much a tangible kind of requirement of what they're looking for from finding of their roles.
Thanks, Dan. I think that's really interesting, isn't it? Because what that plays to is a little bit what we talked about last year, which is really thinking about the narrative content for each of those audiences, rather than thinking of it, if you like, within silos or areas within the website. And I think the data you just shared there around what we see in analytics kind of underlines that point quite heavily. And I think, we always like to, deliver some of the kind of key messages for each year's research. Last year we saw a little bit of an uptake in terms of purpose and communications around the purpose. And this year, we see that reinforced. And I think what we saw, particularly this year, is three key themes that we're going to take you through. Firstly, around purpose-led communications, purpose-led content in the site, and Eric will share a little bit more around that in some of the stats she shares. Secondly, corporate websites becoming much more strategically connected. And what I mean by that is connecting the strategy, both as a purpose and some of the other things that we see in the content in the site. And thirdly, a really great and continued investment in sustainability for all audiences, and we'll share a little bit more around that. So these are the real three themes that we've identified for this year. And that really led us into our overall headline, which we shared with you right at the beginning, which is actually how well does your website serve your purpose, i.e. communicating your purpose and serving the purpose of connecting and engaging with your different stakeholders. So is it really a life force for achieving that, or is it kind of slightly lifeless and not doing that? So we'll take you through some of the examples and best practice for it. So Erica, what have you seen around kind of purpose-led content and communications this year? Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, thank you, Rich. You know, it's been really interesting. In my role at Black Sun, I get the privilege to oversee all the research projects we carry out. So it's been a fascinating journey to be able to witness how the conversation around purpose evolved among the FTSEs. In particular, this year online, after 2 years of sort of stagnation in purpose disclosure in 2018 and 19 in the high 50s, this year, we're seeing a continuation of an upward trend of companies stating their purpose on their corporate websites. So this is, you know, from 71% last year to almost 80% this year. In addition, we also see that the purpose statements have moved away from boilerplate slogans, such as, you know, our purpose is to create value for all stakeholders and shareholders. The companies are getting more sophisticated and using different statements to convey the same purpose, demonstrating that integration and going beyond repeating a slogan. So in this slide, there are other evidence supporting what we meant. Most of the companies that have purpose online are, you know, putting it, not only that they're putting it on the center stage, where they put, you know, the purpose on the homepage or dedicating a page or even whole sections on it. But they have also discussed their purpose in line with their corporate strategy as they increasingly try to evidence the integration of purpose into their corporate narrative and talk about how their purpose drives the business pillars. We also see increasing content in support of purpose, especially thought leadership content going beyond the promotional videos and case studies, such as, you know, AstraZeneca's What Science Can Do. And again, this evidence that they're pushing the purpose and putting that it sits at the heart of everything they do in the company. And finally, when we look at how linkages to the corporate purpose are being referenced from different sections on the websites, among the FTSEs, we see the strongest linkages to purpose coming from the sustainability section at 58%, followed by careers at 43%. This suggests that typically sustainability and careers audiences are often the targets for purpose messaging, a finding that is consistent with last year's, really. And it's interesting to note, however, that looking at year-over-year data, the greatest increase of reference to purpose is from the career and the investor relations section. And I think that's a shift reflecting the increasing demands from those respective audiences, something that we also see in the analytics that Dan mentioned earlier. Now over to you, Dan, as Dan will take you through some examples to illustrate some of the points highlighted.
Thanks, Erica. So I'm just going to dip out into a browser, far better for showing websites, as we all know. So Rich, Erica, shout if you can't see my browser. I'll take your word for it that we can. I'm happy with that. I've just got some examples I just want to kind of touch on in terms of showcasing purpose. And I think the first one is the Pru in terms of their kind of About Us section. This is what I would refer to as pretty much a good standard of purpose page. So if we're navigating through, you'll see that immediately I'm met with obviously an introduction to how they are, helping people to get the most out of life, and it's all around kind of making healthcare affordable and accessible. But they're also then showcasing how that benefits, their different stakeholders. So thinking about the financial benefits, but also social benefits for, customers, whether it be their investor audiences, and obviously then beyond that in terms of employees. So it's all really nicely linked in terms of showcasing kind of what they're trying to do and how they're trying to achieve it. If we look at other areas of examples of how someone like Legal & General, again, a similar kind of example in obviously similar industry, they're showcasing purpose front and center. This is their homepage. Our purpose is to improve the lives of our customers, build a better society for the long term, and create value for our shareholders, which is a really nice kind of message to land on. And interestingly, they've got this little kind of integration with an interactive kind of cityscape, and I'll come on to that in just a second. But when I kind of click through into the About Us, what they're also then doing is referencing, the fact that they've got their purpose, improving lives of customers, introduced by their CEO as well. And again, just making sure that that's interlinked with what they're doing, and also then interlinked with the strategy as well. If I just showcase to you where that link went on the homepage as well, the city kind of idea is quite an interesting one for them, because what this is trying to do is just showcase how they are really influencing society. So what we're now trying to do is think about purpose, and the purpose in action in terms of how that works. So thinking about things like housing, whether it's changing the way that people are, using their cars in terms of charge points, retail, leisure, hotels. There's lots of examples here of just what they're doing within the society that reflects on their purpose. So when we click on one of these areas, for example, transport infrastructure, we're then introduced to how they're making transport cleaner all around the railways investment, and then I can link through to more information about those press releases. So it's really making, and to Erica's point, purpose interlinked with everything across the site. The two more examples I just wanted to show you was Aviva, because again, interestingly, they've taken on a whole new branding positioning, which isn't just relating to their corporate site. This whole "It Takes Aviva" is something that is now intertwined with everything that they are communicating. So if we look at this page, within the About Us section, there's a message from the CEO, introducing it. But it's also showcasing the latest TV advert, which talks all around it in terms of "It Takes Aviva." And it's intertwined then into things like the values, into the manifesto as the business. And again, really interesting to see how they can then bring that to life by linking out to then stories within the business of how they are living that in terms of their manifesto and in terms of what they're trying to achieve. The final example I wanted to showcase was DBS. Now, DBS, a bank that lives, breathes its values in terms of it's very much a purpose-driven organisation, and what they're really focusing on is thinking about things around the vision of the business. So when we're looking at things like this and the homepage, we can use the About Us section to navigate. But all the time, there is this little hover button on the bottom right-hand side, which is saying "Discover Portraits of Purpose." And what they're looking to do is wherever you are on the site, whether it's introducing the business and what they're doing, some stats or whatever, you can then reach out into this and find recommendations and stories for exactly how they are living and breathing their purpose. And interestingly, they've popped this into their COVID-19 section. So thinking about their commitments, thinking about how they're linking that back to what they're doing in an organization, they've got this Portraits of Purpose section, which is really much campaign driven in terms of how this is working. Let me just refresh this. It's just taking a second to load. So again, bringing all of these stories to life using social media with hashtags and different things. And what you're able then to do is drill down into these individual stories and find out more about how the purpose is being lived and breathed by, the people that are working with the business, and obviously then those that are, working for it. And what it's also doing then, DBS goes even further than most, because what they've got then is some really interesting things around this whole notion of live more. And the live more section here is all around kind of storytelling. So things around, life hacks, inspirations, thought leadership. And what they've got, if I just refresh the page again, is some interesting stories around, how that purpose is being lived and breathed. So, things around kind of carbon neutrality, food waste, living and breathing the stories I mentioned. And then just going on, and this is something that I find really interesting, is they've even started to create a regular program called Sparks, where they have characters, and it's all around how the DBS team can make a difference to people's lives. And this is a 15-minute kind of almost TV show that they're creating, whereby it's all around how they are living and breathing their purpose and working with, the different kind of elements of the business to really live and breathe all of those elements.
Great, thanks, Dan. So I think, what we're seeing there really is, if I'm interpreting what you're saying right, Erica and Dan, is that, purpose is really, whereas last year we saw a bit of an upkick in terms of purpose content, what we're seeing this year is actual purpose driving and leading and interconnecting with a lot of the content across all of the different stakeholder groups and flowing right through the site. And I think that kind of links with our second theme, doesn't it, around being really strategically connected. So Erica, tell us a bit about what we've seen in terms of this theme.
Sure. I guess the two areas that were apparent when it comes to being more strategic. The first is around the discussion of corporate strategy on the corporate websites. We are observing that more companies, first of all, more are providing an overview of the corporate strategy, and this, 87 is in the past. In the past 2 years, I've been in the high 70s, and this year has seen an increase of 87. And as discussed before, we also observe an increasing number of companies relating their discussion of strategy to their purpose. And another metric that we are tracking, but we would like to see more of is, of course, companies bringing their strategy to life by means of linking it to news stories, case studies, and other pages on the site. Currently, only 24 does that. But it's in the next slide where we see the real improvements I see, and then the numbers. So together with the rise in numbers of the disclosure of corporate strategy, we see an improvement in the quality across metrics such as, disclosure of the strategic objectives, priorities, targets, more market discussions. And this chart illustrates some of the metrics that we track and how the numbers have been moving over the years. And we can see that the increased level of detail and insights in communicating corporate strategy is something that we started observing last year and is continuing to evolve this year. Over to Dan for some examples of how some companies do it well.
Yeah, I find this trend really interesting because it's something that when we've reached out to a lot of organizations over the last year with the benchmarking, we've gone around and spoken individually to them. It's something that I think, it's one thing to say you've got a strategy, but actually there's a whole level of transparency beyond that in terms of showcasing kind of how the business is working with it, and obviously aligning with that whole purpose message. You'll hear me mention that a couple of times in these examples. So the first one is thinking about Landsec. And Landsec, obviously an organization that's got their strategy front and center on their site, and really thinking about these three kind of core areas. So you can see immediately they're starting to talk around, the competitive advantage. They're talking about their purpose. They're talking about the global forces of change. And again, what they're trying to do is then introduce the user to additional information with the use of kind of video elements, and thinking about how they can showcase the stories for each one of these kind of individual pieces, but also then cross-linking that to things like the strategic priorities and performance drivers. So if we then, again, expand out in terms of these areas, we can deep dive into individual areas where we're thinking about, the different priorities and thinking about how that is influencing the business and what the business is doing back in terms of how it's performing. And you'll see there's a number of trends here, not only from what we were discussing in terms of purpose, but there is also thinking about things like ESG as well as one of those key performance drivers. And we'll come on to that in a little bit more detail later in terms of how companies are interspersing that within their narrative. And you'll see here that the key part of this is, well, that's great. You've got all of that strategy at the top. You've got your key performance indicators. You've got those elements. But actually, how is that delivering for the different audiences? And that's something that Rich just mentioned there around the purpose kind of things, but definitely thinking now around strategy and the audiences. And again, breaking down those silos, breaking down those individual walls, because thinking about what that means for each one in terms of how that's influencing the messaging. Smiths is another interesting example we wanted to kind of showcase. And this is, again, aligned with a purpose-led strategy. Thinking about the purpose front and center in terms of, to make the world safer, more efficient, and better connected. They've got themselves a neat little kind of diagram where they split this into kind of two kind of key areas around kind of the outperforming the chosen markets and delivering world-class competitiveness, intertwined then with this third element of strong financial framework, which kind of underpins everything. And what they then do is break that down, and they haven't gone for huge amounts of interactivity or, whizzes and bangs, but it allows you to understand how outperforming our chosen markets is impacting, the focus on the markets, maximizing growth as an organization. And then what they're also then doing, as you kind of drill down, is really thinking about how that can intertwine with the strategic objectives of the organization, linking out to things like their operating model, and going into then things like the business model about how they're creating value, and then backing them up with things like the KPIs right through in terms of this. And you'll see here that the KPIs, thinking about their operational performance and the portfolio strength, are then backed up with those strategic objectives. So again, what they're doing is cross-referencing it, making sure the user really has a good understanding of what their ambitions are, how they're performing, and also what their kind of targets are for everything in terms of what they're trying to achieve. The final one is really around Lloyds. So Lloyds Banking Group redid their site last year, and thinking about their kind of strategy section, they updated it a little bit in terms of how this works. So thinking about where they were in 2011, thinking about where they are now in 2021, thinking about obviously what that means in terms of moving forward, the good work that they've achieved to date. And what they've done is they've interspersed this with good content narrative, but also use of video to help bring all of that narrative to life. And this is actually introduced by some of the obviously the group executive committee. So again, it gives a certain level of gravitas to the communications in terms of that senior management buy-in. And then it aligns with very fundamental strategic pillars. So they're thinking about helping Britain recover, which aligns with their purpose and has actually changed a little bit, that word recover, obviously, in the last 6 months or so, in terms of how they're evolving their strategy. And also then things like, Britain's preferred financials partner, enhancing the capabilities, and then going beyond this in terms of the environment, external environment and business model. And when we click on one of these pillars, what we're met with is actually some real deep dive information in terms of the targets, their progress, what they're trying to achieve. So as a user, I'm able to not only garner that we've got targets, I'm actually able to see how they're performing. So what they're doing is outlining why this is important. They're thinking about those long-term vision of what they're trying to achieve, the investment that they're making, and also then the measures of success. So again, you can see how that narrative aligns with what Erica was talking around in terms of the strategic targets, overviews and KPIs, and then key differentiators within the business model, and thinking about how that all intertwines in terms of bringing something that has a narrative and a flow to it, rather than just saying, here's our strategy, and that's it, take it or leave it. So again, it's definitely some direction of travel for how organizations are communicating. Erica, do you want to take us through the next section? I think you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Dan. Now, yes, to continue around this observation, the second area that we saw where the conversation gets more strategically connected is around the discussion of investment propositions. Now, previous research had suggested that companies tend to place their investment case online, as we typically observe about 10% more companies have investment cases online compared to their annual reports. Top reasons cited for this include the desire to have easily accessible and impactful investment narrative. Over the years, this trend of communicating investment case online has gone up from 34% to 44% in 2021. So, and we see that out of the 44, on average, these investment propositions are better connected to strategy and performance, and providing better link to their corporate strategy, business model, and quite a good number of them are also providing discussions linking back to the company's KPI and financial performance. And then again, we'll illustrate some of these points with a few examples.
So I find investment case a really interesting kind of conversation in terms of how we can communicate the examples. I'm going to take you through to Nestle and Shell. And I think the reason why I find it so interesting is obviously it depends on the makeup of the investment community, in terms of retail investors versus. But I do think actually thinking about the audience's needs, thinking about making it easy to find content would always denote that an investment case would be needed, because actually as a business, we want you to invest, therefore here is our investment case. So therefore, there is an argument for making this as easy as possible for audiences. And it's something I've discussed with clients at length in terms of, think about what a media section is for, think about what we're trying to achieve with investment section, think about what we're trying to do with careers. Because actually, if you start thinking about the audiences and personas, you can actually build something that is appropriate. And it's exactly what Nestle have done here in this example. Because what they've done is they've structured a page which is really kind of well structured, introducing the board and the management's kind of desire of what they're trying to achieve in terms of pushing the business forward with obviously superior results. They're introducing then 3 kind of key areas of what that kind of means for the business, and allowing you to understand kind of, you know, how they're going to execute their strategic vision, how the management are going to keep them on the right kind of track, and then how they're going to create that shared value kind of in the long term in terms of the society and shareholder kind of mission. And what they're also doing is front and center is listing their strengths. Now, I will admit, from a UX point of view, I'm not a huge fan of the carousel because I couldn't tell there was one without any buttons. There was only this one of 4, but if you slide to the right with the mouse, you will see it transition. But again, these are really important messages in terms of, you know, what this is saying. So, you know, the global reach of the organization, thinking about the product portfolio, you know, these are all reasons why as a business they're in a position to take advantage of the market currently, and obviously work with, the different kind of facets of their stakeholders. And as we kind of transition down, thinking about that narrative again in terms of, you know, the total shareholder return, thinking about information around kind of the TSR and whatever, you know, the long-term value creation story. But again, these are all very kind of simple messages, and all they've done is taken this content, I believe, directly from the annual report in terms of the assets, and then fundamentally backing that up with kind of key performance highlights. And you'll hear Rich and I talk a lot around the kind of the narrative and investor section. First is investment case. Second is thinking about how you back that up with key performance and KPIs. So you're then saying why you would want to invest in our organization, and then you're telling people, well, actually, here's our great performance over the last 5 years, and this is why, you know, you should come and invest. And then the final piece of the puzzle, and obviously a very important one for Nestle, is the CSR element. So thinking about the responsibility angle, obviously from an organization, obviously with kind of things around palm oil and beyond, but really understanding of what those commitments are that they're looking to do in terms of Nestle and society, backing it up with a nice video as well. So you've got a real kind of page that outlines a really kind of, you know, strong investment case in terms of, you know, the organization and helping kind of influence people's decision making. If I then showcase to you the example of Shell have kind of aligned it with 3 very key messages. So it's around strong and leading cash generation, it's around clear cash allocation priorities, and it's also about powering progress. So if we take powering progress, you'll see an alignment here, and again with our friend purpose. So again, thinking about, you know, how they're powering progress, thinking about the investment case, looking at how that links to the purpose, but also going a little bit further in terms of how that's underpinned by the core values of the business. And again, you'll see here on the left-hand side, I can then drill down into, you know, net zero ambitions, you know, value chains, decarbonisation. And each one of these elements then gives me more information about these kind of topics. So again, it's a really kind of nicely structured way to showcase obviously key messaging, thinking about how they can bring in some rich media, and again, allowing me to still see that there's 3 key priorities. And at any point I can then drill back, find out what those priorities are, and drill down to more information. So it's a really succinct way of kind of creating an investment case, slightly different from obviously what we've seen in terms of Nestle, which is more of a standard approach from a web page point of view. But I think nonetheless, it really helps kind of articulate a narrative of the story.
Great, thanks, Dan. We actually have a question which I think is good to pick up now from Josh, which is basically, why do we think we're seeing trends of companies demonstrating how strategy is being lived, and are any proof points of how investors use this information? I mean, I don't know if you guys have a point of view on this, but my gut feel, or my thinking in talking to clients and so on, is that you know, there's a real feeling that they need to communicate how the strategy is being realized and delivered, and really bringing it to life through the website. And I think particularly in an era of, I guess, remote contact with investors and the investor community, that's seen as important. I think the other thing that we do hear from clients, it'd be interesting to see if people on the call have the same perception, is that, you know, particularly the investors that don't know you so well, actually they're the ones that predominantly you'll tend to use this kind of information more in the website than perhaps those that are already familiar with you. And Dan, Erica, I don't know if there's anything to add to that response or thoughts.
No, I think I I would tend to agree with that, Rich, because it's a form of stakeholder engagement, right, or shareholder engagement, where some shareholders, if companies don't have the venue or opportunity to engage one-on-one, how do you communicate that your strategy is as lived as possible, is as authentic as possible, to inspire their trust? And the way to do that is to bring it to life on your website, because that's the first place that they will go to get that information.
Yeah, and the only bit I'd add is just that it's across a myriad of different stakeholders, because actually, you know, a lot of different audiences are now focusing on this, and it's not good enough just to say, you know, here's our strategy. It's exactly Erica's point, which is its trust is built through the examples of what you're doing in a day-to-day basis. So, you know, those strategy and action kind of ideas, bringing together, you know, bringing to life stories online. Actually, it's those proof points. And again, you'll have seen us talking about that with strategy and purpose, and thinking about how you can live and breathe those elements. And again, that resonates very well with audiences, because it then creates this joined up ecosystem of communications, which actually breaks down some of the barriers of the audience centric kind of nature of what we do in terms of what audiences are looking for.
Great. Thanks for the question, Josh. Hope that answers at least a little bit. And I know also there's been some research done by the Revell Group that shows that, you know, corporate sites do influence you know, investor perceptions, and therefore through that their investment decisions. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a shape of what we would say to that. Great, thanks for the question. I think the third theme then is, you know, sustainability focus. So, you know, I guess we've seen now that we've had purpose-led content, we've seen strategically connected content that takes the purpose, delivers through the strategy, and shares some of the performance case studies, outcomes, and so on. So, Erica, what are we seeing in terms of the sustainability focus? I think that's a bit of an increased theme as well from last year, right?
Right. So starting, well, the past few years really have seen investor audience increasingly looking for transparency in ESG disclosure, and companies have responded by improving their ESG disclosure online. In their investor relations section, there were only a handful of ESG discussions back in 2019, and we observed that number more than doubled last year to 34, and this year that trend continues to grow to 41% of the FTSE 100 disclosing the ESG information for their investor audience. We are also seeing that this rise in disclosure continued to be supported by enriching contents. So we've tracked different types of supporting contents, and most have grown over the years, in particular, the ESG reports and presentations. And, you know, we are seeing that companies are adopting various approaches when disclosing the ESG information online. More commonly is to have a separate, very prominent ESG section that is then linked from various other sections, such as investors, about us, or careers. But Dan will be able to show you live some of the way these companies are approaching it. Over to you, Dan.
Thanks, Eric. So again, I think ESG is a really interesting one. We've had long debates about where ESG should be sitting in terms of within the site. We've seen a number of different kind of ideas for this. One is standalone in terms of whether it's you know, ESG relating to responsibility or sustainability within the kind of the narrative of the site. Our preferred option is within investors, because it's very much an investor focused messaging on sustainability kind of topics. But that's a debate for a whole different day in terms of what we're going to run through. So what I just wanted to do was showcase to you a few examples. And the first one is, again, my friend the Peru. You know, really nice kind of implementation of ESG in terms of their strategy, linking it back to their purpose. Again, you know, consistency there with the examples we're showing you today, and really bring it to life in a really simple way. So they've integrated a nice little visual element here in terms of how they're bringing all of this to life through, you know, their strategic differentiators, you know, their enablers, and obviously then in the middle their purpose in terms of their ESG kind of focus. And as we kind of scroll down the page, again, just keeping it nice and simple. I think this is why I like the kind of example. You know, those three different pillars of the piece, backed up by the graphic in terms of how they're making, you know, healthcare more accessible, thinking about the human impacts and climate change, and then beyond in terms of the different kind of messages. And again, each one of these I can then link out to find more information at the relevant place in terms of, you know, within these sections. If we take a look at someone like Vodafone, and Vodafone's ESG messaging is very much in their investor site, because their investor site is actually separate, so it's a little microsite. And again, their messaging is all around kind of ESG. So what they've done is create a little ESG section. So you'll see from the navigation, there's different elements that sit within this around, protecting our planet and the different kind of focus areas, even creating a SASB page in terms of the content piece. But when I look at the ESG landing page, what's really nice about this is they're backing it up with those additional documents that we were talking about with Erica a moment ago, thinking about how they can then link that back in terms of the kind of the main kind of narrative of the business, and thinking about how the video can then align those kind of pillars of the strategy, and then the pillars of the purpose backing that ESG messaging up in terms of what they're trying to achieve. And they use nice little graphics as well as we kind of go down. You'll see here a nice little tabbed approach in terms of putting out some kind of key stats in terms of the work they're doing around it. And I think fundamentally then just creating those targets as well, so you again can see what they're trying to achieve and by when. The fairly standardized approach that we've showcased recently is how companies are creating kind of ESG pages which align with their focus areas. So this is Novo Nordisk. They've created an ESG portal actually in their sustainability section. But what's nice about this is it's very clear from the narrative exactly what they're trying to do. So again, they've got data sheets. So again, they're providing additional documentation and thinking about each one of these kind of key areas of focus. So thinking about energy consumption, CO2, waste. And when you drill down into them, it's not taking you off to other sections. It's actually creating that content on the page, talking around what they're doing, talking about their performance, and allowing you to then interact with these charts and data to again find out more information about each one of these elements. And the final example, which is probably the one of my favorites in terms of how they brought it to life, is then going beyond that. And what we talk a lot about with our clients is, it's one thing around ESG content to link to sustainability focused content. A lot of those companies will just create links that take you from the investor section through. What BP do is they actually create ESG related content. And so what they're doing is communicating their purpose. You'll see at the top, they're linking that to their strategy around their 2025 targets and their 2030 aims. They're creating additional documentation. You can see here on the right, the investor pack again, and also then linking it to other communications that they're pushing out, such as ESG data sheets, but also aligning with things like their reporting suite. Backing that up with senior management influence in terms of here, a nice little quote in terms of from the strategy and sustainability EVP. And then thinking about how that relates back to their reporting. And then going beyond that, they're actually pulling in kind of recent kind of rich media kind of interviews. So again, there's some interviews with kind of the different presentations that they've done. This is an interview with Anne Simpson, who's actually doing a whole kind of piece around what BP are doing and how BP are doing so well at it. So again, really interesting to pull some of that investor views in on their ESG kind of narrative. And again, backs up that transparency we were talking about and that trust element we were thinking to a moment ago. And then linking all of this ESG content across in terms of the latest news. And again, thinking about those proof points and then beyond that into obviously related content. So it really gives you a full flavor for what their ESG kind of narrative is in terms of what they're trying to achieve. Going beyond this, we just wanted to kind of touch on some of the interesting data that we've seen in terms of the sustainability focused kind of messaging. And this is something for our event on the 6th of July. There's nothing like plugging the next one while you're in the presentation. So what we've seen is, again, some high numbers in terms of businesses thinking about how they are describing their sustainability impact on the world. Thinking about TCFD, and you may have seen it a few times in terms of some of the documents which are showing around TCFD and SASB and beyond. So companies are starting to embrace that more and more in terms of having a view on it and making sure it's front and center. And then you'll see, obviously, then the ability to share specific news around sustainability. Businesses are allowing users to, again, not just say here's company news, but actually breaking it down into things like sustainability, investors, and beyond. So you can actually get more of a flavor of what you're interested in. So again, more of that to come on the 6th of July in terms of the sustainability narrative and how that's improved the communications around how businesses are communicating sustainability. Just to kind of summarize the findings, we've obviously talked around the three major themes around, purpose, strategy, and obviously sustainability focused messaging. And I think from our side, what we've seen in the data that we've gathered, and obviously we've got a myriad more in terms of the analysis we've done on all those metrics, is really there's been a greater emphasis on digital communications, and more than ever before, in terms of making sure that it aligns with how businesses are communicating, why they're communicating, and obviously then building up, as we were talking about moments ago, in terms of the narrative and the business and the trust and the purpose, linking all of that together with strategy and beyond. And I think 2020, although obviously with its difficulties, actually saw a lot of sustained investment in terms of corporate websites looking to improve things around content, looking to improve the way that they're telling that narrative, and storytelling. So thinking about how we can add value. So it's not just saying here's what we're thinking, it's also then providing proof points. It's linking back to the narrative, thinking about how your sustainability approach can link through to your strategy, thinking about your purpose as your golden thread throughout your site, and definitely kind of aligning to how audiences are being kind of focused on, and thinking about stakeholders in terms of communicating with them in a really kind of engaging way. And I think what we found is that we're really kind of two very key questions to start thinking about in terms of what that means for our audiences, and obviously then what that means for kind of audiences as a whole.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think, what we're seeing over the last couple of years, as we talked about earlier, Dan, didn't we, in terms of the, now that we're seeing a position where companies are really thinking much more around a narrative content through the site. They're kind of led by the kind of purpose as their keystone, and that's driving and shaping how they articulate and communicate the strategy, much more kind of focus on sustainability and the outcomes and case studies. And we'll tell you more about that in our kind of sustainability webinar in a couple of weeks. Actually, I think we're seeing a slight evolution now of the corporate website structure, to perhaps talk much more around kind of the thematics around, the kind of the purpose and what we do, financial performance and overall performance, long-term sustainability, people and so on. I think the narrative and the structure of the sites, we're starting to see shift away from, if you like, the silos of the different audience groups. And it'd be interesting to see if that does come true, but that's kind of our little prediction over the next kind of 2 or 3 years. And I think, the second thing then is I guess one for you, which is, how well does your website stack up? We do different types of reviews with prospective clients. We can do a summary review about, kind of recapping what we assessed today, share it with perhaps the wider team internally for you. And also an overview of how you perform at a high level, and the performance with the FTSE 100, and also give you some ideas and territories for improvement. There is also kind of a paid-for service around the full report, which gives you a real deep dive, absolute specifics, perhaps named peer review and so on. So if anyone would like that, do reach out to us after the session. We'd be very happy to talk further. And I'm delighted to see a couple of questions come in. And so just almost by osmosis, that's great. Amanda, I saw your question pop in earlier. I just wanted to save it for this bit because I thought it was quite an interesting question, one that we get asked quite a bit actually. And Dan, that's around whether investor sections tucked away and about us as opposed to top bar where I currently sit. So they're saying, it's developed for investors. What's our view? Do you want to take that first, and then I might add a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's all around kind of what the focus of the business is. What we've seen over the last few years is obviously investors being predominantly within the main kind of navigation, because obviously it's one of the kind of key areas of kind of stakeholders. But what's been really interesting is actually the shift of actually putting sustainability and responsibility before it within the main navigation, because I think there is a certain understanding of actually we want to be seen as more of a sustainability focused organization than maybe all about the numbers. But from a transparency point of view, I would always recommend it being in the main navigation. But I do caveat that with what Rich was just saying there about question number 1, because what we're seeing is less focus around you're an investor, therefore go to this section and find out everything you need to know, versus actually I need to immerse myself in the site and cross-pollinate different kind of elements of content. And I think that for me is what ESG is blowing wide open, because all of a sudden it's breaking down the more traditional view of a corporate website structure, which is exactly what Rich was just saying there around kind of, do you have investors, sustainability, careers, media, or do you start thinking about how actually let's put maybe more personalization in there. Let's think about how we can maybe break down some of those kind of Chinese walls in terms of the different elements between content, and really immerse yourself in what you're looking for in an audience that might be some in the investors, some in the careers, some in the media, wherever, that actually help you find what you're looking for.
Yeah, I think the other place we see, Amanda, that kind of tension, if you like, is particularly where a corporate site is doing a combined job of addressing either B2B or B2C audiences, and also, if you like, corporate audiences. And very often, if the two are, if you like, blended into one navigation and structure, investors can get deprioritized because obviously the B2B type content is taking higher priority. And what we often see then is either the separation of the two sites to give more kind of separated and segregated view, or perhaps split or tiered navigation, so that you can still see it primary and center stage, but without it overwhelming some of the other content. But happy to pick up with you afterwards if you'd like further conversation, Amanda, but hopefully that answers your question a little bit from our perspective. We've got another question from Sally, which is last 12 to 18 months, relying on websites to communicate more strategically and proactively to their stakeholders. How do you see that developing in the future? I mean, I think we will see that continued theme of communicating much more about the actual outcomes and performance results, trying to bring evidence to life of what the effect of the business is doing, how it's achieving its strategy, making a difference, contributing to wider society. That to me is probably the biggest theme that I expect. Erica, Dan, what would you say to that?
I agree with what you said. I think that transparency has definitely been a trend, and Erica identified it earlier. It's something that we were talking about last year. It's something we'll be talking more about this year, and I think it'll be something we're talking even more about kind of next year as businesses kind of realize the value of it.
Thanks, and also there's a little bit about being transparent, but also just disclosing more, and just going back to the ESG examples. What my researchers have been seeing is that there's, in addition to ESG reports and presentations, there are more and more companies putting on supplemental information, such as downloadable Excel data files, or just data tables of KPIs sorted by pillars, topics, fact sheets, and things like that. So companies are really getting leaning into providing us as much information and being as more transparent as possible.
Cool, great, thank you. Another question here from Vilna, hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Do you find websites changing yearly to align with integrated reports? And obviously a lot of content that we've shown was around integrated reporting and so on. And I think then we probably are seeing, aren't we, more of the content being mapped across the rest of the site, perhaps not so much within a reporting area, but just seamlessly joining it. Do you think that's right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's something we've helped a lot of our clients with. We call it content mapping for obvious reasons, in terms of making sure that we're taking what's in the reports and making sure it's updated on our sites for our clients. And it's something that is obviously an important facet of what we do. But to Rich's point, it's also then identifying kind of key areas. And actually I was doing it yesterday with a client, of actually saying, here are the pages you're currently missing. So you have 4 pages on stakeholder engagement in your annual report and nothing on your website about it. Why don't we just take it and move it and reuse it? So those conversations are really important, to just not simply fill in the gaps, but also work out where the gaps are and try and work out how you can then add value to them in terms of the content you're producing across the different kind of ecosystem of columns.
Great, thank you. And a final question from Matthew, which is many examples were quite content rich and so on. Is that something that we're seeing? Great question. I think it will be probably more video and animations. I think we've seen a little bit of attention around videos, particularly with COVID and the ability to film and bring new video content. So perhaps a little less growth in that area than perhaps we'd see normally in the last 18 months or so. I actually think as well, we're going to see more what we call kind of layered content. So somebody able to, if you like, just quickly skim content down the page, but then reveal or explore or deep dive into more content. For example, I think the Shell example did that a little bit, but Dan illustrated before. where you can actually scan the page and get an overview. But if you do want to do a bit of a deep dive, you can go in and get rich content rather than presenting all of that content right up front. I think that's probably what we're seeing quite a bit of, isn't it, Dan?
Yeah, absolutely. That kind of, people that have got a bit of time versus people who've got a lot of time, and making sure that you can then communicate quickly and easily with both kind of audiences. And I think that's why I was trying to show the likes of the Prudential example on purpose, and also then things like Nestle, was because it doesn't have to be, all interactive, kind of features. It's actually around the content and bringing that to life through some visuals and imagery. So hopefully we've mirrored the two in terms of best in class examples to give you guys a flavor of kind of what can be done with the right kind of content, but also then what can be done if you're limited in terms of maybe just having some visuals or thinking about how imagery can help kind of tell that story as well.
Cool. Thank you. A couple of other cracking questions. I'm going to try and get to both of them because they're both really good questions that we get asked. So Sal's asked whether board and CEO need to be the storytellers in chief, and are we seeing this reflected in corporate site? There's probably a bit of a mixed bag, isn't there? Erica, there was an example, wasn't there, about, was it BP, where the CEO was taking a really different approach. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, well, I guess the leaders are now not scared of leaning into social media and using the wider digital channels, going beyond the websites and engaging with the stakeholders. Like BP CEO started having a Q&A, answering some really uncomfortable questions, from the Twitter channel. Basically millennials asking, oh, BP needs to clean up their act in the next 10 years or just shut down completely. And he would just respond and explain why we can't do that, but there are these engagements and programs in place to make sure that we are going in the right direction, etc. So I thought that was that he's taking the role there of a good storyteller, and also engaging with all stakeholders through and not non-formal channels in a way traditionally. Mm-hmm.
And I think just to add to that, we've also seen on sites actually owning kind of sections. So sustainability, having an intro from CEOs and different things is increasing to give it a level of gravitas and to show the importance as a business to these different topics. So again, I think you saw a few of the examples. Again, BP was an example we referenced there with the EVP on the page. So yeah, definitely seeing that across the board.
Great, thanks. The next question was around where's the best place to start looking for statistical evidence to demonstrate ROI on corporate sites. God, what a challenging question that is when we get asked. I mean, it's probably a bit easier, isn't it, when it's a B2B or I guess a corporate site incorporating some of the services and solutions within Marsat. I guess they had a huge success with us in generating I think it was fourfold increase in leads, which is outstanding. I think it's much harder with a corporate site. I think what we are seeing perhaps is a little bit more in terms of things like surveying and feedback and testing with different audience types, and also doing a bit more in terms of perception surveys from people, particularly around careers and prospective employees. I think one client, or prospective client I should say, that talked to us about they'd actually had feedback from prospective employees that frankly said, well, if that website is a summary of your organization, I don't really want to work for it. So you do get impact like that. Dan, have you heard of anyone else that's doing anything interesting in this area outside of that?
I mean, it is difficult, as you say, and I think what we try and do with is kind of setting up kind of key KPIs initially, looking at obviously metrics. There's things around analytics, but it can be quality versus quantity being the difficult kind of element to it. But no, I concur. I think there's a certain level of investment kind of requirements. There's a certain level of sustainability comms, and there's obviously then careers areas, and we can set very kind of clear KPIs for each one of them. But I think it does differentiate between businesses as to what they're requiring.
Cool. Final question was around most popular content management systems, which we will cover in a later workshop. We're going to do a technology one later in the year, Vilna, so hopefully that'll be useful to you. But what I think we are seeing is the use of more sophisticated content management systems, the likes of, perhaps, Adobe Experience Manager or Sitecore and so on, where people can, if you like, put in place a technology platform that allows them to manage the content better, but also refresh and evolve the user interface design and so on without re-engineering the whole back-end system. But we'll share more about that in a future seminar, but that's a bit of a sneak peek of what we're seeing in that arena. We're just doing actually a quick analysis of all content management systems across the piece, so we'll share that separately. And then just on the screen there, you're seeing, thanks Dan, a couple of the other upcoming webinars that we're going to run specifically on corporate websites, so on sustainability and careers, so deep dive more in those areas. Feel free to book. You can either do the QR code snap there, or there's a page on our website as well that has links to those webinars. And bang on 11 o'clock, I'm glad to say. That brings us to the end of the webinar. Thanks, Erica and Dan, and thanks for everybody for spending time and hearing our kind of latest research on the Web 100. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.